Previously on History of Turrican.
We began our epic journey with the original Turrican and found it to be an entertaining and original game, bringing out the best in every system it was ported to.
I'm Funky Monkey. Welcome to History of Turrican. After the success of Turrican in 1990, it was only natural that Rainbow Arts was set to work on a sequel, and so, in 1991, Turrican 2 was released, sometimes subtitled The Final Fight. Interestingly, Turrican 2's musician, Chris Hulsbeck, used a 7-voice software routine to get around the hardware limitations of the Amiga's poorer sound chip and showcase its talents with a rip-roaring 7-minute rock opera that illustrates the backstory perfectly and sounds as good to my ears as it did in 1991. As with the last episode, I'll be going through this game world by world, showcasing a featured system with each world, telling you a little bit about it and how it plays, and this time around I'll be featuring some version differences. But before we get to that, let's talk about the backstory, because this time around, you don't just play a nameless character in a robot suit. Oh, no indeed.
In Turrican 2, your character is named Bren Maguire, and he's the last survivor of his ship, which was conquered by the evil overlord known as the Machine. Leaving you for dead, the Machine has returned to his fortress, and you have equipped yourself with the new Turrican fighting suit. And now you're out for revenge! The surface of the planet Landarin. This is where you begin your one-man war against the villainous Machine, facing off against Hornets, Walkers, Clingers, Droppers, Sentries, Slime Monsters, and a crazy robot samurai, not to mention the giant robotic head at the end of this world. World 1 is a massive upgrade from the original, with more colour and decidedly deadlier enemies to boot. And Hulsbeck's score for this world is jaunty and upbeat, excepting the boss themes, which range from daunting to downright despairing. 8-bit versions feature an extra secret room filled to the brim with lives and diamonds. The definitive 16-bit version, the Commodore Amiga, shines out here. Crisp, colourful graphics, rich sound effects, and the score, which is at turns jaunty, inspiring, unsettling, settling, and always evocative of the environment. I won't say that this is the only way to experience this game. What I will say is that this is an incredibly impressive achievement. The underground reservoir, in which cave spiders, snappers, spike heaps, spiky balls, and even fish try to make this world your final resting place. But if you survive them, you can look forward to a giant sentry and the Gripper, a fearsome flying machine. This world has an organic theme, decorated with honeycomb-like structures, weathered stone, and a large underwater section. And the score includes an underwater waltz to go with your great bath. On the C64 version, the giant sentry boss has a second form, that of a flying head. He breaks off from his stalk and takes flight, terrorizing you in the air. Oh dear, where did it all go wrong? This is a real disappointment. The technological miracle of the probe conversion has gone, and in its place, Enigma variations have given us this. In its defence, we do get a title theme this time around, and the game loses none of its scope in the transition. And the sound, while sparse, is a definite improvement on the beeps and boops of the first game. However, the graphics are a nightmare of colour clash, at some points rendering the main sprite almost invisible. Even so, it's still Turrican 2, and with all its faults, the game remains mostly playable, and it's definitely worth at least a look. Bren boards a one-man fighter for an all-out blastathon in this world. World 3 changes the game from a run-and-gun platform shooter into a straight side-scrolling shoot-em-up in the classic style. And look out for level 3 too, because there are plenty of enemies, and if they don't get you, the scrolling will. This is, in my opinion, a bold move by the programmers to change the genre in the middle of the game, and the score, including the magnificent concerto for laser and enemies, adds an extra degree of arcade feeling to this world. After a nasty bit of sabotage from the gunship boss of 3.2, 16-bit versions leave your ship unable to fire in 3.3. Also, Amiga and C64 versions feature a Katakis Lives pod. Look out for it. The definitive 8-bit version is bright, bold, and brimming with character once again, and while Hulsbeck's score is noticeably absent, in its place are a suitably scene-setting introductory tune from Stefan Hartwig and a confident array of tunes by one Marcus Siebold. And while the in-game music is only used in World 3, it is upbeat and arcade-esque. The sound effects themselves are as punchy as ever, even though the bounce cannon noise can grate slightly. And occasional graphical glitches do tend to creep in. Ultimately though, any flaws I could find in this game are nitpicks at best. Trends' own system once again delivers. The Walker Factory. If you've ever wondered where walkers come from, this is the place. This world is a maze, and can get incredibly tricky if you're not careful. And while it's possible to slip by the robotic dragon in 4.1, the machine's production line can't be avoided, although you can jump over the giant walkers. World 4 is a claustrophobic place, a nightmare of purple architecture and constricting machinery. All of the enemies are based on walkers or robotic machinery, and the score is suitably industrial, with the merest hint of hip-hop. Eight-bit versions feature a small penalty for trying to outrun the giant walkers on level 4-2. Ouch! This version, again handled by Enigma Variations, at least manages to improve on the colour clash nightmare of the Spectrum port. The graphics are colourful, and while neither the Spectrum or Amstrad ports have the sheer frame rate of the C64 version, the CPC can boast that the main character looks most like the box art, even if he is rather green. Sadly, the battle between Spectrum and Amstrad would always be for second place. And yet, this is not so distant a second, and a worthy conversion, at least in my opinion. The Nerve Center. This is the Geiger-esque world filled with tendrils, mouths, slime and spiders. You've almost made it to the machine himself, but first, you've got to navigate his tech-organic base and face down nightmarish monsters and squidgy things that will make your blood run cold. In my own opinion, this is the most difficult world, as the jumps can be monumentally unfair sometimes, and the timed platforms of the final level can be frustrating if your timing's off. However, level 5.1's creepy leitmotif adds to the horror ambience, even if 5.2 completely contradicts it with an up-tempo track reminiscent of the final countdown. Eight-bit versions do away with timed platforms, and instead offer you a vertically scrolling shooter level, reminiscent of World 3 on the original Turrican game. As before, Factor 5 handled the conversion, Jochen Hippel the sound, and the frame rate is lower. The graphics are converted well from their Amiga originals, losing none of the feel or character. As for the sound, the ST sound chip, the Yamaha YM2149, gives a raw, bit poppy feel to Hulsbeck's tunes, and the sounds do their job perfectly. While perfectionists may prefer the sheer grunt of the Amiga original, a curious ST gamer could do a lot worse than this version. And that concludes the 5 worlds.
But we're not finished yet. There's still one last version to mention.
Ported to the then humble IBM PC by developers Sun Project, this version has had a massive graphical overhaul, and you can tell. While the new Turrican sprite, at least in my own opinion, lacks the charm of the Amiga or C64 version, you cannot argue with the overhauled and upgraded backgrounds and enemy sprites throughout the game. And that's the lot.
Sadly, many of these systems were discontinued not long after Turrican 2 was released. But the ones that did survive could look forward to a third Turrican game, and we'll be diving into that one next time.
On the next History of Turrican.
We examine how the Mega Drive's Mega Turrican became the Amiga's Turrican 3. Released between 1993 and 1994, the third game in the series had some radical changes.